Hi folks, and thank you for watching this video. I'm Larry Kavanagh and I'm glad you're here. The topic we're going to be discussing today is angels and demons. When I mention these two words, some questions come almost immediately to my mind, and to yours too, I'll bet. These are some of the things that we need to talk about. Are angels real? Do angels have bodies? Exactly where do angels appear in the Bible and how often? Do we have guardian angels? Does everybody have a guardian angel? Each and every one of us? Demons, devils, are they also angels? What about possession by a demon? Is there such a thing still in this day and age? What about exorcisms? Do we still have exorcisms? And also, considering Satan and demons in general, why on earth does God permit these bad angels to go roaming all over the earth? Why doesn't God just lock them all up and keep them in hell away from us? Maybe we can answer some of these questions and maybe not. What I'm going to do, though, is begin with the Catechism of the Catholic Church. What the official catechism says in paragraph 328 and following is that angels exist and that they are spiritual, non-corporeal, no bodies, beings. It says that they have intelligence and they have free will. As far as guardian angels are concerned, there may not be specific mention in the Bible about that. Maybe some inferred mention. But it's St. Basil the Great in around the 3rd century AD who first specifically wrote down the concept that we all have guardian angels. He did this in one of his writings against a person called Eunomius. How did devils come to be? That's also been spoken about in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. They committed some terrible sin. Now, there's no place in the Bible that defines what that specific sin was. Many of us have been taught that it had something to do with Satan wanting to be as good as God, and that was his sin, a sin of pride. Naturally, this was not to be, and God cast him out along with all of his cronies that become all the other demons that we talk about. Pride could be the sin, but it doesn't specifically say so in the Bible. There's at least one apocryphal book where something else is said about the sin of Satan. It's the book of Enoch, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. As far as angels possessing people in exorcisms, there really is such a thing as the official exorcist of the Catholic Church. And there are priests who are authorized to perform exorcisms. One of the best known exorcists in recent memory of the Vatican was Father Gabriel Amorth, who died a few years ago in 2016. He was the official exorcist of the Vatican for many years, and he claimed to have exorcised tens of thousands of demons. I think he said 160,000 by his best estimate. There's a book that speaks of his life, him explaining demons. Here's a picture of that book. You can buy this book through the Catholic Company online if you'd like. However, it's a little bit grim, it's a little bit gory. It's not exactly what you'd call a beach read, so I'm not going to talk about it because it gives me the creeps just even thinking about the stuff that he says and the way he says it. What I would like to do is talk about angels and demons as we find them in the Bible, and then start from there and see where it takes us. Now, there are lots of stories about angels and devils in the Bible, far more than I can cover in this book. In fact, if you do a concordance of the Bible for the word angel, you find the word angel appears more than 350 times in the Bible, not to mention devils and other things. Let's start at the Garden of Eden. We're all so familiar with the story of the Garden of Eden. There's Adam, there's Eve, there's this beautiful garden. Everything they see they can have, except there's one little thing they can't have. It's the fruit of this tree, which is right in the middle of the garden. We begin then with the snake, Satan, the serpent, the devil. right away he starts tempting Eve to eat that apple. And what's he saying? As it says in Genesis, eat this fruit and you will be like God. So Eve eats the fruit. She persuades Adam to do the same thing. They both want to be like God. And that's probably where we got the idea that the sin that the angels committed that made them become devils was trying to be like God. But that's by inference. At any rate, the two of them do the forbidden thing, and at this point, God sends an angel, specifically a cherubim, to drive Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden, and to stay guard on the Garden of Eden to make sure that they don't come back, and nobody else can come back to the Garden of Eden. That's the first instance of the devil in the Bible, and the first instance of an angel in the Bible, right there in the first chapter of Genesis. By the way, if you want to locate where the Garden of Eden is, good luck. If you read Genesis, it describes it being at the confluence of the start of 4 rivers, and one of them is the Tigris, and the other is the Euphrates. You can take it from there to find the Garden of Eden for yourself, and good luck. Okay, let's move on to the next big story about angels. We get to Abraham and his wife Sarah. Now, Abraham and Sarah have some grand adventures as they're young and as they're growing up. However, as they get older, they have no children of their own, and it's becoming worrisome that Abraham will not have an heir to pass his things along to. Because of that, Sarah gives Abraham her permission to sleep with the servant girl Hagar in order that Abraham can produce some offspring. So Abraham sleeps with Hagar, and they have a child. That child is Ishmael. That's where Ishmael comes from, the child of Abraham by Hagar. And that's the way Abraham assumes his inheritance is going to be, to Ishmael. Sarah then reaches a ripe old age where she's sure she will never be pregnant. But anything is possible with God. God decides to tell Abraham that, yep, Sarah will bear a child in her old age. To communicate with him, God sends 3 messengers, 3 visitors to Abraham's camp. Abraham recognizes them right away for what they are, messengers from God, angels. So he welcomes them. He feeds them. He gives them all the courtesies that he possibly can for visiting dignitaries, and they tell him formally that his wife will be with child, and by this time next year, he will have a son. Sarah was so surprised at this that she laughed. But nothing is too marvelous for God. Abraham is delighted, and within the next year, Sarah does bear a child, and they name him Isaac. So Isaac is Abraham's child by Sarah, his wife. So that makes Isaac Abraham's full heir. And that's the second story in Genesis about angels. Notice so far, in the Garden of Eden story and in the story of Abraham, angels have been mentioned, but no names of these angels have been given. Only 3 angels are actually named in the whole Bible, and we haven't gotten to the first one yet. Okay, the next major story about angels that I'd like to talk about concerns Isaac's son Jacob. Jacob is sent to find a wife at the camp of Laban, his uncle. On his way to find a wife, Jacob lays down and falls asleep, and he has a dream. In his dream, he sees a stairway coming down from heaven onto earth, and angels are going up and down that stairway in a constant stream. They're visiting people on earth, conveying messages from God, and they're coming back up to heaven, carrying messages to God. The stairway that Jacob saw in his dream is also frequently referred to as Jacob's ladder. After he's had the dream and wakes up, Jacob poured oil on the stone that he had used under his head and named the place blessed and called it Bethel, which means house of God. You've probably seen many churches named Bethel. The story of Jacob's dream is also in the book of Genesis. Okay, next, let's move now to Moses. Moses, as you know, received from God on Mount Sinai the stone tablets with the Ten Commandments. As he gave Moses the tablets, God also gave Moses very detailed instructions on how to build the ark that would house these tablets. The details are in the book of Exodus, and they are closely written details. Specifically, the cover of the ark was to be gold, and gold statues of two cherubs with outstretched wings and facing each other should decorate the top of the ark. So just as with Adam and Eve, where a cherub was sent to guard the entrance to Eden, here two golden statues of cherubs were made to represent them guarding the ark. I'm going to show a picture of the ark as it was made for a movie, and some artwork shows King David dancing in front of a procession when the ark was carried into Jerusalem and he was king. Once again, angels are prominently featured in this story, but no names have yet been given to angels. So moving through the Old Testament, the next story I'd like to highlight is the book of Job. Here, the entire book is a confrontation between God and Satan. At the center of the confrontation is Job, who is a person well gifted by God, wealthy, healthy, big family, all the blessings of God imaginable. Job appears to have no problems. Job worships God devoutly and appears to be well rewarded for doing so. So now Satan comes into the picture. Satan is talking to God. Satan tells God that this man Job is only worshiping him because God is giving him so many good things. Satan bets that Job would abandon God if he didn't have all that good stuff. God says this isn't so. Here's a picture of the argument between God and Satan as envisioned by an artist with a clear sense of imagination. It shows God and Satan arm wrestling with each other as they make their bet. A little bit preposterous there. God is certain that Job will be loyal to him, even if Job were to lose all of his possessions. Can you believe God actually betting with Satan? Anyway, it's the story. To carry out this bet, God takes away everything that Job has. Suddenly, Job finds his cattle are dying. He finds that his children aren't being good to him. He finds that he's coming up with disease. He's got sores all over his body. He's miserable. At this point, one might expect that Job would despair. Many of his friends come and ask him if he has sinned. And Job himself is unsure of what he has done to offend God. But Job never doubts the power of God and that God will not fail him in the end. The book of Job is full of heartfelt pleas. Job, however, stays faithful to God. Many of his prayers sound a little bit like the Psalms, actually. For example, a short version of one of his prayers from chapter 27 of the book of Job is Job praying, "As God lives, who takes away my right, the Almighty, who has made my life bitter, so long as I still have life breath in me, the breath of God in my nostrils, my lips shall not speak falsehood, nor my tongue utter deceit. Till I die, I will not renounce my innocence. My justice I maintain, and I will not relinquish it." So in the end, Job retains his loyalty to God. God wins his bet with Satan, and all of Job's good fortunes are restored. Now, if the story of Job leaves you puzzled about why God would make a bet with Satan, doesn't that seem like a very peculiar thing for God to be doing? I agree. That does sound a bit off-key. However, this story in the Old Testament, much like the next story, which I'm going to talk about next, the story of Tobit, may be more like a parable than it is a story about a real person. Remember, Jesus told quite a few parables in his ministry as well. The message of Job, which is more important than the person, is that when God permits things bad to happen to good people, it could be a trial, not a punishment. The Old Testament idea that if you're good, you'll be rich, and if you have a series of misfortunes, it must mean that you've sinned, just simply isn't so. St. Paul, St. Augustine, the Desert Fathers, many others have expressed in writing that you can't really prove that you're loyal to God, maybe, unless you're tested by God. So that it's a blessing. Anyway, the next book that I find fascinating is the book of Tobit. Just as an aside, Tobit comes before Job in the sequence of books in the Old Testament. However, the time period for Job is about 400 years after Job. So Tobit, it's placed there for story reasons, I think. Tobit may be about a real person, or it might be an invented story to illustrate a message, another parable. The three books of Tobit, Judith, and Esther, which are grouped together in the Old Testament, are all classified by Bible scholars as biblical novellas, which mean that their historical accuracy can't be verified, although the inspiration behind the tales is true. The book of Tobit is a real good story, though. As the story begins, Tobit is wealthy, he's blessed with a lot of possessions, and he loses most of this. Not because of anything that involved God, but because there's a change of politics and a new king came into town. The new king has no use for Tobit and tries to ruin him. A little while later, another king takes over from the first king and restores much of Tobit's wealth. Sounds a little bit like life in some places on earth today. Unfortunately, just as things are beginning to look up, the second king has taken over, there's a catastrophe. Tobit takes a nap outside his house, and he fails to cover his face. Some sparrows are flying overhead, and they dump excrement on his head. This gets into his eyes. Tobit goes blind. He visits several doctors, but no matter what creams they put on him, he's blind. He's now severely limited. Fortunately, Tobit has a son named Tobiah, and he can rely on Tobiah to perform many errands. Among other things, Tobit remembers that there's a person named Gabael in a neighboring town called Media who is holding some money for him. And he needs to send Tobit to Media to collect this money. Tobiah is agreeable, except he doesn't know where the place is. Tobiah needs a guide. Tobiah finds a person who's willing to be a guide and introduces this person to his father. The prospective guide says that his name is Azariah, and he's from a well-respected Jewish family. Tobit's satisfied, and Azariah is hired to guide Tobiah. What they don't know is that Azariah is really an angel. Azariah is really an angel in the form of a human being. So they take off. Along the way, they come to the Tigris River, and Tobiah puts his feet into the water. And suddenly a giant fish jumps up and begins chewing at Tobiah's foot. Tobiah is afraid the fish is going to eat his whole foot. But his guide tells him, grab the fish and haul it out of the water. He does so. And they slit the fish open, saving the heart, the liver, and the gall. And the guide says, you're going to need these things. They'll help you. God will help you with them. So when they arrive in the town Media, Tobiah successfully gets the money from Gabael that he's been holding for Tobit. And Azariah tells Tobiah that they need to stay at the house of Raguel, who is a relative. And Tobiah should marry Raguel's daughter, Sarah. This all sounds well and good, except for one little fact. And the little fact is that Sarah has been married 7 times before. And in each of the times when Sarah was married, her husband died before the marriage could be consummated. 7 times in a row. Well, with a past like that, Tobiah is understandably reluctant to become victim number 8. It appears that Sarah must be possessed by some kind of a demon who is causing these tragedies. And here's where the guide comes in. He tells Tobiah, marry Sarah, and on the wedding night, add the fish's liver and heart to the fire that's in their bridal chamber. The incense from this fire, he says, will drive the demon away. Then you and your bride should pray to God, and God will bless your union. All of this comes to pass. Tobiah's marriage to Sarah is consummated. And after 14 days of celebration, they then return to Tobit, who, of course, is still suffering from blindness. However, Azariah tells Tobiah, rub the gall from the fish on Tobit's eyes and pray to God. The gall from the fish does indeed restore sight to Tobit. And at that point, Azariah reveals to everyone that he is the archangel Raphael. And he also is one of 7 angels who stand and serve before the glory of the Lord. The book of Tobit ends with a song of praise composed by Tobit, which also sounds very much like something from the book of Psalms. So now this was the first place in the Bible where an angel has a name, and it's Raphael. Also, as a teaser, we have Raphael admitting that he's one of 7 angels who do a special service for God. As the Bible goes on, we're eventually going to learn the name of 2 of those other 7 special angels, but not the rest. There is some apocryphal literature, notably this book of Enoch, which gives a name to all 7 of the angels. But for some very good reasons, the book of Enoch is not accepted as part of the Bible. Okay, let's move right along. After the book of Tobit, that's about as much time as we'll spend on the Old Testament. Let's move into the New Testament. This is going to get us to the second named angel, who is the archangel Gabriel. Now, Gabriel is the one angel in the Bible who plays the exact role that the word angel means. In Greek, the word for messenger is angeliophorus. And you see it on a screen there. That's how it looks in Greek. And that is exactly what Gabriel is. He is an angeliophorus, a messenger. First, he visits Zechariah, who's the husband of Elizabeth, to tell Zechariah that in her old age, his wife Elizabeth will bear a child who will be a very important person. Yes, indeed, that will be John the Baptist. And Elizabeth, of course, is Mary's cousin, the one that Mary visited while she was pregnant. The same Gabriel also visits Mary and Joseph to tell both of them individually that Mary will bear a son and he will be Jesus, the Messiah. Mary accepts this role in the Gospel of Luke when she tells Gabriel, "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord." Actually, of the 4 Gospels, only Matthew and Luke tell the story of an angel visiting Mary. And it's only the Gospel of Luke that gives the name of this angel as Gabriel. And that's the one and only place in the Bible where Gabriel is named. So now we have 2 angels named, 1 more to come. But we'll shift the scene next to Jesus being tempted by Satan in the desert. This is described in 3 of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Can you imagine how ridiculous this is? How can the devil tempt God? He's God. Even Satan should know that you can't tempt God, just as he should know that he couldn't win a bet with God over the fate of Job back in the Old Testament days. However, I think in this case, Satan is trying to tempt the human Jesus, thinking that there might be a flaw here because Jesus is human and has human frailties. Of course, you know it doesn't work. The story of Jesus in the desert being tempted by Satan is a very one-sided victory. It's Jesus 1, Satan 0. The bad angels may succeed with you and me, but they're not going to succeed with Jesus. Okay, throughout the ministry of Jesus, there are plenty of stories about devils. Jesus is an exorcist, profoundly. Jesus encounters lots of people possessed by devils and drives the devils out of lots of people. More stories about this than I could possibly have time to tell. But the one that I find most charming, if you call it charming, is Jesus exorcising the Gadarene demoniacs. This story is told by both Matthew and Luke. There are some slight differences in the 2 accounts, but it's the same basic story. In Matthew, it's 2 men possessed by devils. In Luke, it's 1 man. But either way, it's Jesus driving out multiple demons who are inflicting terrible things upon someone. Jesus drives these demons out and sends them into a herd of swine that are nearby. After this, the men or the man are fine, but the pigs are loaded with devils. The pigs go crazy and run off towards a cliff where they jump off and drown in the sea. Then, what I find is the charming part of the story, the people tell Jesus, thank you very much for exorcising these demoniacs that we had, but please leave our area and don't come back. They're so grateful that he's gotten rid of the demons, but now they're afraid that he's going to drown all their livestock. Some Bible scholars, of course, have interpreted this story in an additional way as a backhanded way of reminding the Hebrew people that they are forbidden to eat swine, because it was the swine that drove off the cliff and drowned themselves. Maybe so. But I think the main teaching here is that, as in so many other events in Jesus' ministry, is that Jesus has power over demons. Okay, the third angel that's named in the Bible doesn't get introduced until the very last book of the New Testament. Archangel Michael appears only once in St. John's book of Revelation, chapter 12, where he leads an army of angels who throw the dragon and his army out of heaven forever. This happens before the last judgment, and so the dragon, Satan, at that point is still free to roam the earth until the final judgment appears, where he will be gone for good. So all in all, we've now seen three specific angels and the stories whereby they are normally symbolized. Raphael, symbolized with the fish and as a companion to a young man. Gabriel as the messenger bearing good news. And Michael as the warrior, leading an army of angels against Satan. In addition to the Bible, of course, there's a lot of other literature aside from the Bible about angels and demons. Some of it pretty pious, some of it highly fictional, some of it ridiculous. But I'd like to mention a few of them. First, the book of Enoch, which I've mentioned a few times already, which was written approximately in the 2nd century BC. This book is not in the Bible, and I don't think you'll ever find it in the Bible. Enoch names the 7 angels alluded to by Raphael in the book of Tobit, and he calls them Uriel, Raphael, Raguel, Michael, Sarachael, Gabriel, and Remiel. The four angels other than Raphael, Michael, and Gabriel don't originate from anybody other than Enoch, although later authors did pick up on these and added a few additional names of their own. If you do a Bible concordance, you will find that the name Uriel does in fact appear in the Bible a few times, but not as the name of an angel. Uriel was also a name used in several Hebrew families for their children, but not as an angel. Very many demons are named in the book of Enoch. Other pieces of literature have added hundreds of other names. I'll show you a slide right here with just a few of them, and that's just the tip of the iceberg in names that have been given to devils or demons. The book of Enoch also describes the specific sin committed by the fallen angels. I'm afraid it's not a very believable description, and it's probably a reason enough why this book is not in the Bible. As described by Enoch, these angels wanted to have sex and rape human women. He describes them as producing children who were giants and terrorized the earth. Now, in view of the fact that angels are pure spiritual creatures and do not actually have a gender, this really comes across as pure fantasy on Enoch's part. Enough said about that. Another apocryphal book of some note is the book of Pseudo-Dionysius. It was written sometime around the 5th or 6th century AD, and so it's about 500 years younger than anything in the Bible. This book may be the first one to name the 9 classes of angels, that is, seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, virtues, powers, principalities, archangels, and angels, in that order. Very many later angels have picked up on that order, although there's no apparent listing as such in the Bible, except for cherubim being mentioned. Just a tiny little footnote on this, which I have to add. If that was the true order of all the angels, 9 of them, then Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, being archangels, would put them 8th in the list of priority, having a rank only one up from the lowest. So let's take this order of angels and the order in it's 9 different types of angels. As applied to the Bible, the word apocryphal does not necessarily mean that a book is bad. It simply means that it has not been universally accepted as something that is genuinely inspired. So, for the word apocryphal in that context, I can call later works, such as the works of Dante, apocryphal. Dante's books, and I will, Dante's books describe purgatory, hell, and heaven, and they are certainly part of famous classical literature. However, Dante's vision of hell is from the imagination of Dante, not from divine inspiration. Dante lived during the 1300s, and he was heavily involved in the politics of Florence and other parts of Italy. Dante's Inferno describes 9 levels of hell, and each one of these levels appears to be populated with certain devils who bear a strange resemblance to his political rivals. Possibly even more famous than the words of Dante, the poetic words, are the pictures that were drawn by Botticelli. Here's the famous picture of the gigantic urn with 9 levels of hell containing some very ugly demons and some humans undergoing some horrible suffering. Also, in addition to the Botticelli paintings, there are some very famous graphics drawn by Gustave Doré of even more demons and more suffering. With all of this artwork about demons, it might be fair to ask, what does the devil really look like? What does an angel really look like? In reality, the answer is we really don't know. If we look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it said angels are spiritual, non-corporeal creatures. So that means that angels don't have bodies. Well, if they don't have bodies, how can you possibly say what they look like? We can visualize them manifesting themselves in a certain way. For example, Raphael could manifest himself as a companion to Tobiah, but there's really no answer to the question of what Raphael looks like. He is a spirit. There's a famous movie from 1927 made in Germany. It's a blockbuster called Metropolis by a director named Fritz Lang. This movie is an allegory about heaven and hell, and I can call it apocryphal. It pictures a beautiful city. Those who live above the ground enjoy all the good things to eat, all the good things to wear, and all the good things to do. Below the city, there's an awful place where poor, condemned, enslaved people have to work constantly under dreary conditions to operate the machinery that keeps the upper levels happy. But the machinery that they work on is more than just a machine. It's a devil in itself, and it's called Moloch. Actually, the book of Leviticus, chapter 20, does refer to and names Moloch. He's a demon who thrives on eating human beings. The place in the movie where the machine turns into Moloch is striking, and it's clearly another apocryphal vision of hell. I'm going to just take a minute or so to take a look at this little snippet from the movie that shows the machine turning into Moloch and eating people. Well, on that thought, I hope that's something that sets you thinking. I'm going to stop and say thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.